the security bodies, however. For this reason, the man will be further endangered because other elements will still stand against him before his election to the presidency and will be concerned with the thought of killing him, which is why he runs the risk of falling victim to another assassination attempt. Billy says then the possibility still exists that he will still be killed and depart from this life. Semyaza says this danger is quite great, but after the assassination attempt, security precautions will be so drastically tightened that he will escape the danger. However, I want to explain to you the most important data about this at a later time. For now, it is such that this President Reagan will be the empowered one who will bring the doubtful world peace that will only be laboriously preserved until then into wavering, for as a power-hungry person, he has been of the crazy acceptance for a long time that he can solve all problems through force, intrigues, and compulsion. Already for a long time, he has lived with this delusional idea that America must become the most powerful, all-controlling, as well as worldwide military power. Thus, after his assumption of office, he will try to realize this crazy notion, whereby he will use every harmful means available to realize his erroneous plans. Billy says you said during a previous explanation that Reagan could virtually be a sign of a possibly coming downfall. Semyaza says sure, because he will be that empowered one who brings the laboriously preserved and very doubtful world peace into wavering, for which several of his predecessors strove. Thus, he is a bad sign for the beginning of the following armaments that will occur over the entire earth, by which a third world war can then be struck during any later period in the third millennium. In accordance with his crazy actions, everything in the world will line up very quickly even more toward terror and anarchism, for those who are misguided believe to recognize in his hunger for power and in his tyranny a means by which they could reach their confused and unrealistic goals. Even on the so-called normal citizens, everything will have its effects, which will especially be terribly expressed in Switzerland, in that crime will dramatically increase at a very alarming rate, according to which, in the month of April 1981 alone in your homeland, so many murders of people will be committed as what will be the case throughout the whole year of 1980. Billy says who? Do you mean that in April of 1981, in Switzerland, there will be as many murders committed as altogether in the whole year of 1980? Semyaza says that's what I said. Billy says man oh man. That will be so cheerful. Semyaza says these are only the other following signs of the coming and slowly approaching global decline. But the signs will pile up very rapidly after the recovery of the US president because soon after this, criminal elements in captivity will try to obtain a political status. Irish Republican Army prisoners, murderers, and other serious criminals will try, with difficulty and through hunger strikes, to extort the British government in order to be able to be considered as political prisoners. The Englishmen, however, will remain unyielding, according to which, in the first days of May 1981, the first criminal hunger strike will die out, as it will already happen weeks before in Germany, where the same method of anarchist criminals will be used to extort the government. But the hunger strike will also lead one criminal to his death, which will occur with the criminal Bobby Sands, who will be the first of the Irish Republican Army criminals to die of hunger, and then in a few days, the next striker will follow him to death. But all this is only the beginning of the labor pains, starting in the year 1981, of the oncoming worldwide disaster, degenerated terrorism, and destruction, as well as various wars that will be released and waged worldwide by the USA, which will, for the time being, lead to the fact that the earth will be afflicted by a very malignant, great arms race. But this has already been inexorably set in motion, thus, it can hardly be prevented any more. We will, indeed, do everything permissible to alleviate an impending catastrophe, but we cannot prevent it by force, as we are not authorized to intervene directly in the crazy machinations of the Earth people and their governments. For this reason, we also cannot prevent or alleviate the assassination attempts on the so-called high-ranking personalities, to whom presidents and ministers, etc., will fall victim, and concerning these facts, Italy, as always, will hold a leading role through the criminal organization, Red Brigands, and the Mafia. But the members of these political and criminal organizations will fatally prove to be strictly devout Catholics, and on May 13, 1981, a low blow will be dealt to them which will give them something to think about. Namely, when their alleged spiritual head becomes seriously injured by an assassination attempt of a sort Turkish assassin. But also in Billy says, do you mean that the Pope will be shot by an already known assassin? Semyaza says he will be dangerously injured by the assassination attempt, but I will tell you more about this later, because before this happens, there will still be some other things that will occur that should at least cause the people in Europe to pause for thought. Thus, it will happen that at the end of the month of April, 1981, and in early May of 1981, in Austria, namely in Vienna, a head of the city will be shot, while afterwards, in Germany, a minister will also be robbed of his life by shots. Billy says, and what are the names of these two? Semyaza says their names are not important, and for certain reasons, I cannot officially reveal them. Billy says, then just don't. Semyaza says you will also be less burdened through this. But listen further, for you know the truth about Israel and especially about its politics. Due to Reagan's innocent politics, Israel, which indeed wants to gain control of the country of Palestine by all means, will thereby allow itself to be misguided to reveal its true face. Especially the criminal and national president, Begin, will betray his true German hostile attitude and will try to compromise the German politicians with lies and intrigues, and indeed he will do this already before the assassination attempt on the Pope will occur. And before, in France, the new national president named Mitterrand will be elected, who then likewise pursues a policy which leads toward the destruction of the nation and the earth, as will be the case with the American president, Reagan. Only, the new French president will handle these matters differently than Reagan. Billy says you mean, therefore, that they, during the year 1981, will let the cat out of the bag? Semyaza says sure, and indeed with absolute certainty. But up to this point in time, the Germans will not realize that their reparation attempts, up to that hour, have been totally wrong, and that with Begin they have nourished a deadly brood of vipers at their bosom. A brood of vipers of a quite especially poisonous kind, which constantly just aimed to forcefully pull everything into its possession, whatever it could get its hands on, with lies, deceit and intrigues, which has been the case for a long time with this man. Perhaps those responsible ones in Germany and in the other countries of the earth will also finally recognize the truth, that namely the original forefathers of the Israelis pursued this murderous method, to make drunk and pretended friendship those to be exploited, in order to butcher and eliminate them in their drunken stupor. Billy says for those quick of hearing and honestly knowing and searching, this was already known for thousands of years. It is also indeed written in the Bible. Semyaza says sure, but only for the quick of hearing and knowing ones. The know-it-alls and fantasizers never want, however, to see this factual truth. Perhaps the machinations of Begin in the year 1981 will finally bring about a change. Billy says this is therefore not yet certain. I mean that this change will come. Semyaza says no, unfortunately not, and even if this should be the case, Israel will still gain the upper hand. This also is the sign that the Pope in Rome will soon begin to make common cause with the government of the land of Israel, which essentially belongs to Arabia, by which the Pope would be stupid enough not to recognize that he also is only exploited by Israel's power-mongers as a means to an end for their dark and opaque plans. And just here I must briefly anticipate the chronology of events, because something will be planned, particularly in connection with Begin's defamation of the German politicians, which will express the true face and the true attitude of the Israeli power-mongers even more blatantly than the insult against the Germans it would already be after the assassination attempt on the Pope, if the Israeli state powers will commit a further crime of world-provoking nature. If namely Begin will insult the German politicians, he will only do so